All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, and if other people trickle in later, that'll be fine. This session is specifically about Backdrop's philosophy and sort of the why behind the decision to fork Drupal. I'm guessing most of you probably already heard of Backdrop. Sorry. I'm going to keep telling me if I'm getting in the way of things. Can you see all right? Okay. So Backdrop is a free open source software solution that is intended to help developers or site architects, as we like to call them, build websites for projects that have more comprehensive needs, but maybe perhaps not more comprehensive budgets.
So, of course, Backdrop is a fork of Drupal. Like I think most people know that. For all intents and purposes, we can say it's a fork of Drupal 7. It's actually early Drupal 8, but you can say, like, if you're on Drupal 7, moving to Backdrop is kind of the ideal transition, or starting a new site from scratch. So as the functionality you kind of expect from Drupal 7, but also a lot of features and things that were added into Drupal 8, but on Drupal 7 architecture. So moving and migrating existing code and sites is a little bit easier, maybe a lot easier, to Backdrop than it is to Drupal 8.
Does everyone know what a fork is? Okay. In general, you just take a piece of software, steal it, change its name, and then give it away again. And now it's something else. But the reason that we decided to fork instead of continuing to do something like long-term support for Drupal 7 is because Drupal 7 is old, right? It's 10 years in the past now, and to build modern websites, it's not quite adequate. And so we tried to take Drupal 7 and modernize it in ways that we couldn't do on a long-term support platform. Yep. The big goal here is that we wanted to create another tool that web developers will be able to choose from when they have to build a project. I know in the Drupal world, once you get over the learning curve of how to do things in Drupal, every time you see a problem, you're like, I can solve that with Drupal. And it gets really exciting because that's what you love to do and you're passionate about and you do it. But I've seen a lot of people build things that maybe aren't the best done in Drupal because that's the skill set they have. And I would kind of encourage, and this is getting better in the Drupal world, people are starting to think outside the box and be like, do we really need to build Drupal for this simple website? Maybe we can do a static site, or we can do something in Gatsby or what have you to fit different needs. And so that's kind of our idea of Backdrop, is that, like, if you have a really simple site, there are tools like Squarespace out there where you can say, just go make a Squarespace site. You can have something up today. It doesn't require a lot of effort. If it's being a little bit more complicated, you can say, well, you need something to be able to enter data. You want to customize it. You can use something more like WordPress. And then there's the big fancy enterprise system where it's like, okay, if you have a really complicated need, here's this great tool that'll let you do that. And Backdrop is supposed to sit between what WordPress can do and what Drupal 8 can do, sort of like the next version of Drupal 7.
What's the icon on the left? Is that
Squarespace? Yeah.
So Jen and I, we're the founders of Backdrop. I'm QuickSketch on Drupal.org, and Jen is Jen Lampton. I think we have some things about us. Yes. Between the two of us, we have a lot of experience as Drupal website builders. We've built a lot of projects for organizations large and small, mostly large ones here listed. We also individually have a lot of experience doing Drupal education. I, as Lullabot, was in like the original Drupal training company, and we were flying all around the country training people about Drupal on Drupal 5. We made the original training videos for Drupal that were distributed on DVDs, which, yeah, pretty awesome, huh? I also helped write the first O'Reilly book on Drupal.
I started doing Drupal training on Drupal 6, but actually started it here. We were asked to teach a whole bunch of people on Stanford how to use the Stanford infrastructure to build Drupal sites. So that's how I got started doing training, and we realized, like, oh, this is information that's going to be valuable to everybody. And so we developed a class we started doing in San Francisco and around the US, teaching people how to use Drupal. And then Drupal 7 came out, and I started to feel that people were struggling a lot more with the concepts in Drupal 7 than they were in Drupal 6. And it sort of drove me towards, like, how can we make this software easier for people to use, more intuitive, and for people who aren't necessarily like hardcore developers, but their job is to take care of a site. It needs to be more intuitive from the code side too. Like, they need to be able to get in there and do what they need to do and get out. And so all of this experience of teaching people how to code, or people who just, maybe they are coders, but they've never worked with Drupal before. Like, how do you get over the Drupalisms and into getting stuff done quickly? And so our position on Backdrop is coming from an experience of we need to make this easier for people to work with.
We also have some extensive history in Drupal core development and is contributed development on this episode? Well, a lot of experience in Drupal. Drupal 6, I wrote the Ajax framework that we still basically use today in Drupal 8. I still am a file and image system maintainer for Drupal 7. And I wrote the dialogue system in Drupal 8, as well as was the primary advocate for using Seek Editor in Drupal 8.
I'm a little newer to core development. It wasn't until after Drupal 7 came out, I got really mad at it. I was like, why is this stuff not done? And then I realized that I could do something. And I was like, oh, this is in our hands. And then I went gangbusters. I joined the Drupal 7 usability team, and I did a lot of studies on how people are interacting with the software, trying to figure out, again, make it easier to use. And then the fight for trying to make things easier for people to learn is what drove me to be the unofficial Twig initiative lead for 2 years in the Drupal 8 cycle, because I wanted to make the theme system easier for people to understand as well. And so bringing our experience in like understanding how decisions were made in Drupal, our experience in working with core, and our motivations for improving Drupal to improving Backdrop in the same way.
All right.
We also love the community. We spend a lot of time at Drupal camps and conferences. For 10 years, I was the lead organizer of the Bay Area Drupal camp up at Berkeley. I was one of the lead organizers of DrupalCon San Francisco in 2010. But long before I ever contributed a line of code to Drupal, I was running a registration desk at an event, and I felt that one of the things that drew me to the software was the fact that it can help so many people do things that they couldn't have done without it. And so that's also driving us to create a similar product.
These numbers shock me, like, and they just keep going up. Like,
well, time goes
150 Drupal events. That's a lot of Drupal events.
That's good. That's like yours plus mine.
I know, but it's still terrifying. Like, that's a,
oh, what did you do?
There's not going to be an
There it goes.
I hit the I hit the B button, which apparently is black.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, all of this is to say, all that little background and introduction is just to say, we are people that love Drupal. Like, we absolutely do. I thought we had another slide on that. Like, we built our careers on Drupal. We've made our largest group of friends through Drupal.
We met each other through Drupal.
Yeah, we met each other through Drupal. And all of that, like, Drupal is the foundation of all of those things. And we have to acknowledge, like, and thank Drupal for what it is, and say, you know, we harbor no animosity towards the Drupal project.
And we're also working on Backdrop because we want the thing that we love to continue. And Drupal 8 is great, but it's different software. And we felt there was a lot of value in Drupal 7 being like a proven successful piece of software that's done all these amazing things for people to come before. So we want it to continue as well. So now we have Drupal 8, which is one route forward, but we're also trying to keep Drupal 7 moving forward too. So that's what Backdrop is. Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the way that Backdrop organizes its project management, for lack of a better word.
Nate and I are the co-founders. It was sort of our brainchild in the very beginning. But we're not doing this alone today. We did Nate in particular did a lot of research into how open source projects can be managed, and decided that the project management committee was something that we wanted to pursue for Backdrop. Yep,
and so the project management committee is effectively a slightly more democratic way of running a project, where instead of having a single BDFL is the open source term for benevolent dictator for life, that is the supreme authority within the software project. The Apache model is the project management committee, where they form a committee or board, essentially, that makes all primary decisions, and then it's done via votes. And then there's a process for introducing new people into the committee by votes. It's basically just like a committee board. But it's the model that all Apache projects use, and now that we're a part of this conglomeration, the Software Freedom Conservancy, which is basically a wrapper around other GPL projects for being a fiscal and legal sponsor. So you can donate to the Software Freedom Conservancy, and it passes through money to other software projects, including Backdrop. They actually require a project management committee model on top of also not requiring, but strongly preferring GPL. And so we happen to be like fitting right within this groove of this is kind of the best way to run an open source project according to them and all of the children projects that they're underneath. So we're borrowing from a model that is successful and proven.
So we have 6 members of the project management committee right now, and our project management committee is supposed to be representative of our community as a whole. So we try to make sure that each member of the committee is representing a specific constituent. So Nate's on there right now as a core committer, so he can inform us about like, oh, how hard is that going to be to change something in Backdrop? We're going to look at that. I'm coming to it from the user experience perspective, like, is this easy enough for people to use? Mike McCaffrey is a back-end developer, so he's looking at how the APIs work and are they going to work the way you want to when you're writing code against them. Wes Rubacabla is our front-end guy, so he's going to make sure we're doing stuff on the front end that's going to be easier for people to understand and things that people like to use. Jack Aponte is there to represent the business focus, so if we want to build a fantastic feature in, they'll be like, no, I can't sell that, which is something that's important. And Gregory Nestis calls himself a non-coder, but he's actually been filing a lot of pull requests against Core, so I'm not sure he can call himself that anymore. But he's there from the perspective of, I don't want to write any code, I just want to click buttons and I want a website at the end. So having that perspective of giving people a really powerful tool to do the things they need without needing to get into code. And all the people on our PMC right now are also supposed to be reflective of race, gender, geography, languages spoken, a bunch of other stuff. And so that way, if we end up having like a huge, surgence of people in Mexico who are using Backdrop, we're going to be like, okay, let's put someone on the PMC.
Or education.
Or someone in education, or whatever happens to be a growing area. We're going to make sure that that community has a voice in making decisions about how the project should move forward.
Yep. So the project management committee's responsibility includes conflict resolution, setting overall project direction, ensuring changes follow the project philosophy, and if necessary, changing the project philosophy.
Can you talk about each of these?
Oh, yeah.
So in terms of handling conflict resolution, that means if you have 2 people in an issue queue who are arguing with each other, a lot of times you just kind of let the fire burn out, and whichever ember is still burning at the end is the one that wins. We don't want to have that kind of conflict in our community. So if it looks like 2 people are starting to have an argument, which happened actually between 2 of our PMC members, myself being one of them, someone else will come in and say, no, let's send this to the PMC and let them make a decision. And then it gets kicked upstream, they have a vote, and it comes back down and it says, okay, guys, this is what they decided. And so that'll help make bonds between our community members stronger, or at least less hostile, we're hoping. Setting the overall direction the project is choosing, like, okay, what is going to be in Backdrop 114? Or is, the internet will change vastly. 10 years ago, we didn't know we would be interacting with phones. So at some point, something else like that might happen, and the PMC will say, look, we need to go this way because that's where the internet is going, and they have the power to set that direction. They also have the power to review all of the changes that are going in and say, does this match what we want for Backdrop, or are we putting in something because somebody's driven it forward, but it doesn't really align with what we want from our software? And then also, if you have something that comes in that you're like, oh, everybody on the PMC agrees we need this, but it doesn't align with our philosophy, then that means our philosophy needs to be updated first, so we can publicly state, this is what we're for, and then you see that change, and then you see the change going. So it's not like the changes will be driving the philosophy. The philosophy needs to be changed first to drive the changes.
Yep. All of this, for the entire PMC model to work, you need to do, oh, this is a new slide. Oh, that's what you just said. Okay. I didn't know that slide was there. This is what I was going to say, is that in order for the entire PMC model to work, like, you bring in all of these different people from all of these different backgrounds, they're all going to have different experiences, and they're all going to have different biases. They're all going to want different things, and that is okay.
Well,
but what
that was on the previous slide.
But what you need is the project philosophy to be defined, so that people are weighing the decisions against what does the project need. And my experiences help shape. Yes, it really is. My experiences help shape. What I think is best for me, but I'm putting that aside and saying, okay, I need to be saying, how does this align with the project's philosophy? So in order for all this to work, You have to write down the philosophy.
That's something that happens a lot in open source too, where people come in and they're like, oh, well, I have this need, and so this is really important. And without something to say like, is your need what is everyone's need, or is your need the same thing that's like what the project is about? It's really hard to decide whether that's an important feature or not. And so if you have a list that's like, okay, this is what the project needs, and you can look at your need and be like, oh, well, you know, maybe my thing isn't in line with what the project needs. This is obviously going to be a contributed module because it's not something that the project needs built in. So just having that kind of ability to judge your own desires versus the project's desires will help us make better decisions about what should go in more.
So, what are they? Like, what is the philosophy? That's super important in our world. The first one is summarizes easier updates, but primarily backwards compatibility is important. And we came up with this philosophy 5 years ago when we first started the project, when backwards compatibility had been totally thrown out the window in the world of Drupal. And this is kind of guided, like this being one of the most important factors, is that we were looking at this saying, we need this, like changing a lot of things adds a lot of cost, and that backwards compatibility is super important to make it so that you can maintain a site for a long period of time.
When we first decided, we were like, looked at different projects and how they handle backwards compatibility. We looked at WordPress's stance of like everything is always 100% backwards compatible, and we looked at Symfony's stance of like everything will be deprecated before it's removed. And we're like, wow, Drupal, particularly Drupal 7, which we were starting with, is such a beast. Like, how are we ever going to match either of those? And so rather than specifically stating always backwards compatible, we've stated backwards compatibility is important, and that leaves us a little wiggle room in terms of like, we need to make a change, we can, but we need to find a way to support our developers in making that change.
Yeah.
And as we've been working through Backdrop, it's become more and more clear that we were really worried about it because Drupal never did the backwards compatibility thing. But as we started adding stuff, we're like, oh, this isn't so hard. In most cases, we're finding ways to do a smoother transition for our adopters. The next one is simplicity. And so this is where Drupal 8 decided to make all of the code object-oriented and based on Symfony models. That requires a level of understanding that we didn't want to be a requirement for working on Backdrop. And so we're saying, rather than trying to choose the latest and greatest design patterns, we want to choose code that most people can understand. So whether you're a developer or not, we want you to be able to open a file, read it top to bottom, and get a general idea of what's happening. And so that means that the way that our code is written is going to be slightly different than the way that Drupal 8's code is going to end up. We also want our software to have a specific focus. So making sure that we're not just including everything, but the features that are included need to benefit the majority of people. So that meant removing a lot of features from Drupal 7 that benefited less than 1% of sites that were running it, and adding in a ton of features that were very heavily used Drupal contrib modules. Extensibility is also important because Drupal is fantastic on its own, but it would not be the tool it is today without the massive number of contributed modules or themes you can add to it. So we have to keep those APIs in Backdrop because that's going to be just as valuable for Backdrop as it was for Drupal.
So Backdrop performance is extremely important for us because we're targeting like lower budget sites. Like that means lower infrastructure costs are also really important to us. We do have every time we make some decisions around performance, we're trying to use shared hosting actually as our benchmark. Like, is this acceptable on shared hosting? And some of our optimizations, in fact, are targeted specifically towards shared hosting, saying like, we shouldn't be working with the expectation that you're going to have a reverse proxy like Varnish or a CDN like Fastly in front of these sites. Like, we're literally working off of like, we want you to be able to run with the bare minimum of functionality and actually optimize our software towards that use case.
And your site needs to be fast. So Backdrop, when we first released it, was significantly faster than Drupal 7. We haven't benchmarked it recently. We've had a lot of features, so I'm a little hesitant to be like faster than Drupal 7. But I'm sure that if you added all those same contrib modules to Drupal 7 and tried to do an apples-to-apples comparison, it would still be faster.
Right.
We are also, anytime we're doing anything that requires, we need benchmarks before we put this in, this might be expensive. So it is something that's always in our thought process of like, we can't put in something that's going to make a huge performance drain on the software.
Releasing on time. So again, like, it's heavily dependent or based upon the history of Drupal at the time, where Drupal 8 was in development for almost a decade. Like, I mean, it was a really long time. Like almost half of, maybe a decade is an exaggeration, but like it was like 7 or 8 years. Like literally half the existence of the entire project was spent on one release. So Drupal 7 had this like giant long lifetime compared to all of the previous versions of Drupal, and nobody had any idea when Drupal 8 was going to come out. It was like the constant refrain was like, when does Drupal 8 come out? Yeah, when it's ready. And so nobody really knew, and that was always the policy for Drupals up until the present. And so planning and scheduling releases was really important to us to say, you know, people need predictability. They need to schedule things, and we need to make that available.
Developers need to be able to say, this week I'm going to be busy. Companies need to be able to set aside budget and say, this quarter we're going to need X dollars to do an update. And when you have it all on a schedule, this is something we also took from WordPress. It's really easy for the community to follow that same schedule.
And lastly, freedom. Remaining both free and open source. Like some of these things, we definitely share the heritage of Drupal, that Drupal is GPL software, and we inherited that with pride, saying we really love and support the open source community, and we really want to make sure that what we have created is accessible and free and open to everyone.
It worked. We got forked. Woohoo!
Yes, there actually is a Backdrop fork, but it's like the press flow of Backdrop. It's called Silkscreen, and so it's like the high performance, high end, scalable version of Backdrop,
Yeah.
Similar to press flow. So all of this we distill out into the Backdrop mission, which is Backdrop CMS enables people to build highly customized websites affordably through collaboration and open source software. Is there another bold? No, there's not. But so some keywords just to really go through. I know it's a little cliche, but missions are really important. Philosophy is really important. These things determine what your product will be. And so going through some of the keywords here, geez, almost every single one of these is a keyword. People. So
Backdrop for people.
yes, so we're saying it's for humans, it's for people, and it's not necessarily for developers or business managers. We want to be able to take anybody that is just out there, any person, and say, we want to enable them to build something. And what we're having them build is highly customized, so flexible, like not WordPress. It's more structured and more flexible than that. And websites. Like, we are really focused on websites, not systems or APIs
Or applications.
or applications or any of these things. We're really focused on websites. Having all those things are all like, you know, frosting on the cake. But what Backdrop does is it builds a website. It doesn't build a mobile application or an authentication system. I mean, you can do all of these things, but that's all peripheral. What we're doing is building websites. Affordably, lowering the cost. Like if you're using a system that's not saving you time and saving you money, you shouldn't be using it. So affordability is one of the most important things in our entire process. And then collaboration, the way that we build and construct the software together, and then open source, making it available to the world. So this keyword, affordably, like how can we do that? All systems should work with this.
Something like Drupal 7, we knew we had a long way to go. I had a bunch of people in Drupal 6 that really struggled when we got to Drupal 7. And they're like, oh, it's sort of outside my budget. We're like, okay, so we have to start from that and kind of rein it back in. So the first thing here is to increase the out-of-box functionality. So the more you can do without needing to install modules, whether they're custom or contrib, is better. The second one is making it more intuitive and usable. The less time you spend searching documentation and reading and poking in the wrong place to find something, the less time you're going to spend working on the project. Making the developer experience better. So if you can just get in, do the thing you need to do, and get out without needing to learn 8 different subsystems, that's probably good. And decreasing the amount you're paying for hosting on a monthly basis. Making ongoing maintenance easier. So Backdrop now shipped with like a update core button. So that was something that was really high priority.
That's another point, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Ongoing maintenance, I guess, would be like over, like, I don't know. Meh, that's one. That's 3 things that are one bullet.
Well, making upgrades is about like major version upgrades. So 1 to 2, which so far
7
like
to 1.
Yeah, 7 to 1. Yeah, actually, even upgrading from Drupal 7 to Backdrop, like we've heard from a lot of people that moving to Backdrop is substantially easier than moving to Drupal 8.
Or moving from 6 to 7,
or
or even moving from 5 to 6.
Yep. I think I mentioned that yesterday. That we had one development shop proclaimed that Drupal 7 to Backdrop was the easiest Drupal upgrade they've ever done, and that's pretty remarkable.
And that we hope to be the hardest one you ever have to do for Backdrop. Every region would be easier than that.
Yep. And more things.
Like obviously, as we continue to improve these things, there will be other things that become the pain point, the most expensive part of building a website, and so we'll focus on decreasing those costs too.
Yep. So releasing on time, one of our key principles. We have a 3 times a year release cycle. January 15th, May 15th, and September 15th. They come out like clockwork.
We just did one on Wednesday.
Yep, and so the current version of Backdrop is version 1.13, and so we've had 14, is there a thing for 14 releases? Yes, so we've had 14 releases since the first version of Backdrop that came out January 15th, 2015.
Pretty good track record so far.
Yeah.
We did have one that was like slightly after midnight, but I still think that qualifies.
Yeah. But it's nice that
And what time?
California time, but it was fine in Hawaii. It was legit in Hawaii.
Yeah. But the paradigm that we have is that the head branch or the 1.x branch of Backdrop should always be shippable. And so there's sometimes some things that we like commit and then iterate, and that's considered completely acceptable. But at any time, if the next version of Backdrop had to come out tomorrow, it could. And so there's never we'll have this stuff be broken for a little while and then we'll fix it before the release. It's like, no, this stuff always has to be working at all times.
So our next release is scheduled for September 15th. If you want to see what's in it, we have a release milestone and a roadmap on our website. But because we mentioned Backdrop isn't going to be as great without add-ons, we want to give you a little update on where we stand with modules, themes, and in Backdrop layouts. It's also an add-on. So if you look at the top 100 Drupal 7 modules, there's colors here that indicate if there's a little blue checkbox, that's something that's been moved into Backdrop core. If there's a green checkbox, that means we have it in Backdrop contrib. There's 2 other things. There's that little cog wheel, which means we're either working on it, so those are also red or green to say like we're either working on it contrib or working on it in core. And then there's 2 X's. The black one means you don't need this anymore in Backdrop, usually because we have something in core that replaces it. And then the red one means we just haven't started working on it yet. So of the top 100 modules, 9 of them haven't been started, and all the other ones are accounted for in one way or another, which is pretty good. But if you look at the total, it's even better. So this is also a new slide. We recently realized that there were a lot of things in there that were included in core, but a lot of things that we've included in core weren't in the top 100 modules. So we just wanted to put a list of those. This is also available on our website. So we just looked at the things that were really common use cases or things that were very popular Drupal modules. And then totals, we have 540 contributed projects that are available to install today, and 540 total in development, 412 with releases. So that's more than 100 that are not ready yet, but coming soon, which I think is a pretty good indicator of our projected growth.
So security is always a concern that we have every single time we have one of these presentations. And we want to make you guys feel a little bit more secure that the Backdrop community has representatives on the Drupal security team all the time. So we're tightly coordinated with them when a security release comes out for Drupal. We know about it beforehand, hopefully. I have once
a couple
or
of
twice.
issues where we're like, hey, can you please make sure we have access to see that? And they're like, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
And
oops.
Yeah.
But we do coordinate and release security releases on the same day. And we also work on the Drupal fixes themselves, especially the Drupal 7 fixes, because our overlap is very strong. So there have been multiple times where we've contributed towards the Drupal security fixes themselves and vice versa.
And yeah, sometimes they roll patches for Backdrop too.
Yeah, that's even happened from time to time, which has been really excellent.
And we also have our own security team. So when Drupal 7 end of life happens and it stops getting security releases, we have our own process, we have our own private queue, we have our own way to deal with security problems in Backdrop.
Yep, and we have had that happen from time to time.
But we have issues.
We have issues that Drupal doesn't sometimes. And that also applies to contrib, that we're also watching all of the contrib stuff. Oh, Backdrop core.
And then our releases are also scheduled on Wednesdays, so it could be that one Wednesday there's a Backdrop release, the next one there's a Drupal release, and they're not related. And then in contrib, our process is a little bit different than Drupal because we're on GitHub. We have some different abilities where we have people on our security team that watch all of the Drupal releases and will notify maintainers of Backdrop projects if there's a Drupal release, just to make sure they're working on a fix and hopefully have one out within 24 hours. If those maintainers don't respond, our security team also has commit access on all contrib projects in Backdrop. So we can step in and say, are you working on this? And they'll be like, no, I'm really busy. And we're like, okay, we got it, don't worry. And we'll go ahead and apply the patch and make the release for them. So we've got sort of more of a support structure around our contributors, which is nice.
Yeah,
Speaking of contributors.
Yeah, community by the numbers. Why don't you keep going on this, Jen?
Sure. So I pulled all these numbers this morning. We think there's actually a problem with this download count thing. I opened an issue for it because it's code seems to go down instead of up. We have a number of people who are downloading Backdrop. These numbers come from GitHub, so that's where they come from. Backdropcms.org number of user accounts is around 2,000. We did have a spam problem early on. We think we got it under control, so I think those are real people. Reporting live Backdrop sites, there are 865, so those are people with sites in production. We use the same module that Drupal does for counting projects, but we fixed some bugs in ours. So we think these numbers are more honest, but it does make them look slightly smaller. And in core contributors, we have currently about 95 people who have commits to core. Actually, that went up this last release, it's at least 98. I need to count them again. But it's interesting because that number is higher than the number of people who are currently maintaining our contrib projects, which means that people are finding it easier to contribute to core, which is good because that means we've got more people looking at code and feeling comfortable with the GitHub workflow than I think we were expecting. So that's great. And then on backdropcms.org, there's also a supporters page where people can enter companies who are looking for Backdrop work. And there's 45 there now, and it's pretty telling most of those are Drupal shops. So they're like, we already have the skills to do this. We'll just throw our name on this list, and then if anyone wants Backdrop, there. So that's nice. And if you are interested and want to get more in touch with people in the community, we are, of course, on GitHub. That's where our code lives. We have a live chat on Gitter, which uses your GitHub username. We have a forum if you're not on GitHub, where you can go and ask questions and share ideas about stuff. Our website is backdropcms.org. We are on Twitter at backdropcms. And if you want to ask questions to real human beings, we meet real time every Thursday at 12 noon and 1 p.m. Pacific. We have a Google Hangout that anyone can join in, and every meeting has an open Q&A session.
And they're all recorded and put on YouTube. So like literally you can watch the sausage being made every single week.
It's not very exciting. Although this week's meetings were really good. If you want to watch any of this week's.
Yeah, which Luke is one of our regular attendees at the said meetings.
You can also learn about Backdrop at events like this one, Drupal or web camps. We also are having our first mini camp this year. It's going to be the day before Drupal Camp Twin Cities in Minneapolis on June 6th. And we have virtual user groups that are first Tuesday of every month. So if you want to talk about something specific, that's a good place to do it. And then we are also starting local meetups in the Bay Area. And I think there are some other places, Twin Cities, stuff is happening. So we're starting to get enough people in individual locations that meeting up in person is making sense, which is good.
Oh, but,
that's it.
Oh, you want to mention Bad Camp?
Well, we don't.
Too early?
Yeah, we're probably gonna have a mini camp, bad camp too. But right now it's still a summit, but we'll see how it goes. So.
All right. Well, we've got about 10 minutes yet for questions, which is more than usual. Usually, I combine the demo a little bit, but since we had that yesterday, today is just all
words and slides.
All philosophy. Yeah. So, do you guys have any questions that we can answer about Backdrop?
Yeah, question. And I missed the demo yesterday, so
Oh.
but I noticed you're aiming at a people audience, so looking to make it easier for the non-developer. What's your sort of outreach and marketing strategy to reach the non-developer audience? So you go to a lot of conferences, but guess who goes to conferences?
developers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the problem is we're made up of mostly developers, and so we tend to think like developers. But we do have a couple of people in our community who are really good at making us think outside of the box in terms of how to reach people. Luke, in particular, is one of them. Who's always like, "Why are we talking to developers all the time?" So I don't know that we have a strategy. We're also working with a firm called Facet Interactive, who's sort of been our marketing partner, and they've been pretty helpful in helping us come up with content strategy map and like how do you want to deliver this information to people? Do you have like a newsletter going out? Does it contain the right information? And Tim is really good about like how do we grow our newsletter, and Dr. Lemma came up this week and was like, why aren't we running ads? It's just stuff that like as a developer I don't know how to do any of that. So it's good to have people on the team who are like, oh, we should do X. I'm like, all right, okay. So then we try and do it.
So every 2 weeks, one of our alternating meetings is outreach also. Like, so we have design with the noon meeting, and then the 1 o'clock meeting is always dev, but the noon meeting alternates between design and UX and outreach. And the outreach meeting, fortunately, is still mostly devs, and we're just like, how do we do this? And so we have various things that come up, like, attending different conferences with more varieties, going out to general web conferences instead of Drupal ones specifically.
Putting information on websites that aren't just Drupal websites.
Yeah, getting listed and other
podcasts.
Other systems that are outside the Drupal sphere, especially like that is really where our heavy focus has been, is on Drupal community and in developers in particular.
I think part of that though too is that Backdrop is Drupal, right? It's Drupal 7 with some stuff added. And so I think right now our focus is on people who are on Drupal 7, because we're like, we made this for you. It's got a really easy upgrade path. And I think that that's probably where our focus will stay until after Drupal 7 end of life. And we're like, okay, we've got all the people who are going to come from Drupal. Now let's shift our gear and be like, okay, is there an import from WordPress function, right? And that's where our focus is going to land, because it's like, okay, we've got the people who are coming from Drupal. Now how do we get the people who have grown their WordPress sites? And so I think that this is the market we have right now. And we've got people who are not developers who are also like, hello, how do we? And so I think having them continue to push on the other angles while we're focused on meeting the needs of the Drupal community is probably where we're going to be for the next little while.
So I'll pipe in here. I think I'm the only person who comes just to the outreach meetings and not the developer meetings. So the big picture actually is that it's an unsolved problem, and we're anxiously, open to listening to ideas for other ways we can reach more people.
Well, it strikes me that you have a little bit of a messaging challenge with it, because I've heard you say that you forked Drupal and you wanted to create something new to solve a problem that you saw happen with Drupal, which was that the next version, which was a complete ground up rewrite, was not, the learning curve was going to be too steep, and the direction that they were taking it was not quite right for what you saw was a demand out there. But at the same time, I also hear from the community that it's hard to find Drupal developers. So if Backdrop is Drupal, you still have the problem of it's hard to find and build Drupal developers. And the rest of the community is now learning or expanding into object-oriented programming, which is so potentially the audience of developers that can contribute to the project is getting even smaller.
Well, so that's why all of our philosophy is about, like, we don't want Drupal developers. We just want people, right? Because if you're a person and not a developer and you can get into our code and do stuff, like, you don't have to have the skills that a Drupal developer has to have. And especially today, like trying to hire a Drupal developer, you're trying to hire a Drupal 8 developer. So that's what everyone's doing right now. And that's really hard, because you're not just looking for Drupal experience, you're looking for skills in all of these new systems. And so we're saying, let's go back to being just a PHP developer and remove the requirements for being the Drupal part of that. And so that's what we're working on. We've got like developer experience focused issues. So we're like, why is this so weird? Like, how can we, simplify our hook system where we only have 3 kinds of hooks, and like make it easier to explain that to people. So we're working on removing the crazy experience requirements that you have to know with Drupal and the software, which we're also hoping will appeal to existing Drupal developers. Like, oh, it'll be faster to do my job. Hopefully, most developers like being efficient. So I do this in 5 hours instead of 10. That's like a big one.
I mean, you're right that we absolutely need new blood in development. And in the Drupal world, I'm sure you've maybe noticed over the last decade, we're getting older.
Oh, yeah.
And the number of new people that we're getting in Drupal is not really growing. Like, it's like the people that we get are usually the ones that have to learn it as out of necessity for their job, right? And we're hoping that we can become, again, a platform that a hobbyist would pick up as like, I could look at it right away and go, I can do this, you know? Like that feeling of empowerment is something that we've kind of been losing a little bit of, the like feeling that I can make this happen. And
I think that started in Drupal 7, where things just got like slightly too abstract for people. I felt when I was doing training in Drupal 6, there was more of like, show me how to do it, and then, oh, I can do it. Where in Drupal 7, it's like, there's so much stuff I don't understand because it's weird and Drupal specific. And so we're trying to hopefully get back to that experience of like, we'll show you once, and hopefully you'll be like, I can do anything on this platform. So, and that will also appeal to people coming from WordPress. We've got some work to do on the theming side of things. Drupal's very different from WordPress in that regard. But I think trying to get back to like, if you dabble in PHP, you can do WordPress. If you dabble in PHP, you should be able to do Backdrop too.
Oddly, the most success we've had in that area, I mean, we have been simplifying some things down and saying like, we did some things like we threw out all of the other database systems, and we said we only use MySQL. Like, so you can write MySQL specific queries, and that's totally fine. DB query is completely okay again. Like, using the abstraction layer is optional. Like, if you're more comfortable with it, but
you don't need to understand how it works.
But that's like one less Drupalism that you need to definitively learn in order to write a module. But the biggest one I've had is standardized tooling. That using GitHub as our community tool like has lowered the threshold of the people that can contribute dramatically.
Yeah.
Because they don't even need a backdropcms.org account, although that we would encourage them to do that for community reasons. But I mean, just like we've gotten contributors, like when we started using good first issue, I think, isn't that it?
Yeah.
The tag that GitHub just like promotes like randomly,
Want
like,
to contribute to open source?
hey, here's a
an
project
issue.
that needs an issue, and it's just like a complete like one-liner. There's a typo here or something. A type of
And
good first
random
issue.
people we've never heard of just fix stuff for us. We're like, whoa, that's
Yep.
amazing. How did that happen?
And also the number of, we have live sandboxes on every pull request that you create, and so we have developers that don't know how to use Git. They come in and they see the typo. They go to the file in GitHub, click the little edit button in GitHub. It files the pull request for them based on the edit that they made through the web browser, and then it spins up the sandbox, runs the automated testing. They check it in the sandbox, and then they're like, oh, that worked. And then they say, here, I fixed this problem. Here's the pull request. And it's just like no coding, no local development environment or anything.
Yeah.
And they're just like, I have contributed to the project.
I went back to my high school this year and gave a talk to a bunch of the computer science kids and got 12 of them to commit to coming to a sprint. And from that sprint, 3 of them have now agreed to continue contributing to Backdrop. And one of them has a ton of commits in the release that came out on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of thing where like we're hoping that with the tooling and the decreasing the crazy Drupalisms that are in there, we'll be able to get more people who are just like, oh, I can contribute. And this, our community is also, we've got like some taglines on our forum that are trying to make it like a friendlier place for non-developers. A lot of times you come to, Unix forum or something and you ask a question and you just get yelled at, like, why are you asking this question? It's stupid. And you're like, I'm sorry, and you leave. And so Backdrop, it's like we have this safe place where every question is a smart question. Like there's no dumb question, and you're going to get treated with respect because everybody who's answering them knows that they were a beginner once too. And trying just to create an environment where like beginners are welcome, which is rare in open source. So I think that'll also help. Even if you're not maybe in love with Backdrop, if you're passionate about open source, this might be your gateway into being an open source contributor in other projects. So we've got kind of little angles we're working to try and make it easier for getting more developers.
I didn't know about that live sandbox thing on GitHub. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't know about that? Huh. It's so useful. That's literally 3/4 of all of our QA is done against the sandbox, at least.
Yeah.
Like people
I do
just
all
go
my
out.
QA against the sandbox.
Yeah, the number of people that actually like pull down something to test it is well,
I
one
would say
in
it's more
4 at best.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's that high.
Okay, I'm the only one that probably does
Yeah,
that.
it's like 1 in what happened 90 for committers. 1 in 90.
Did you have one more question? I saw you thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm curious. I just got through a breathless 45-minute presentation earlier today about Drupal 8 and all the new features. Obviously, with the 6-month recycle. And I mean, stuff they've been putting in there, like layout builder and all this stuff, is pretty amazing. How on earth do you keep with all of that?
So we have our own release cycle. We've got our own 62 stuff contributing projects that have been included in Backdrop since we released. We don't have to keep up with everything Drupal 8's doing because we're after a different market and we have a clearly stated philosophy. And so we have people obviously in our community who use Drupal 8 be like, hey, they have this really cool thing over here. Do we want to do this in Backdrop? And then sometimes it's like, no, that's not a match. Like our audience doesn't need that. But we do have a project called Drupal 8 feature parity, where anytime we find something we're like, this is really cool, everyone's going to want this, put it in Backdrop, and we don't ever use the code from Drupal 8 because it's not compatible, but that doesn't mean like it didn't come from a Drupal 7 contrib module that we can integrate in, or maybe it's just something we can integrate directly into our system in some way. So we do have people who are using Drupal 8 and tracking the changes and logging issues against Backdrop on top.
And there are some really amazing things that are in Drupal 8 actually that we probably won't ever have, really. And maybe these aren't the best examples, but like Drupal 8 is going in every direction at the same time. Again, focus, that's something that we're trying websites, the things that we're doing in particular, but like,
it won't ever be in Backdrop.
yeah, like, well,
Headless Backdrop.
Yeah, the fact that they're simultaneously pursuing like inline editing and headless together is just like, come on, like you do one or the other. Plus the traditional editing interface, you're literally going in three directions at once. And so that they can also, because the capacity and the number of contributors is enormous. And what we found is that by focusing, we can do a lot more, at least in one direction, with less.
Yeah.
But we probably will never have the same breadth as Drupal's development capacity. But by doing focus, we can go further in one direction.
Yeah.
So, they're tired of Adobe AEM going in there and allowing people losing business to that.
Right, and we're not competing with that.
No.
Right. So we're like, Drupal 8's got that covered. We're going to do this. Yeah.
Are there certain types of organizations that you see as like the ideal end user of a Backdrop website?
The ideal user for a Backdrop website would probably be, honestly, like one-man development shop or team or department is a great use case for a Backdrop.
Right, where you might have several administrators, a bunch of editors, but only one like what do they call them? Webmaster, right? Where that person's like got to figure out how to manage a bunch of stuff. You don't want them to have to get like too deep into any one subject. They've got to figure out how to take care of their WordPress site, their Backdrop site, and people calling about their email not working. But there's 100 people that are writing content for all of the websites he's managing. So giving that person the tools to take care of that team is sort of what we're aiming at.
Yeah, so small teams, but still have the need for structured content. That seems to be about our sweet spot, where site building tools in WordPress are highly unstructured, big blog posts, and Backdrop, akin to Drupal, like its primary thing is you can really structure things and you can make complex relationships, and Backdrop excels at that as well. But then needing that more complex set of requirements, but with a smaller team to manage it, that's where we are.
And you mentioned WordPress being ported into Backdrop. I remember the migrated modules of that were pretty good. How's your experience as WordPress sites have gotten more complex these days, especially? What's your experience been with that and getting some of these more complex WordPress sites ported over to Backdrop?
So I haven't ported any very complex WordPress sites into Backdrop, but I would imagine that we would just need to very clearly document, like, this is the stuff that's coming in from your WordPress site, and this is where it's mapping. And if you've done anything that's super crazy custom that doesn't fit the WordPress out-of-box model, that's not covered. And then that would be perhaps what went into core. And then if you had, like, WooCommerce add-on, maybe there's a contrib module that would help you move in products or whatever else. So what we would cover in core would be, again, the 80% most common use case. And then for people who do have highly customized, more complex WordPress sites, they would need contrib modules to handle that.
I'd be curious to know, I don't know if you guys know, but has anyone ever done like a cost of ownership white paper on something like WordPress versus Drupal 7?
I'm sure that exists somewhere.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything recently, but
It's a big deal because
Yeah.
WordPress is kind of loosey-goosey, right?
yeah,
It kind of I've seen, just in the last week or two, I've seen sites that somebody upgraded a plugin on their site. Of course, they did it on my site, and it broke their site.
Yeah.
Completely broke it.
Yep.
Both
Yeah.
cases.
So I noticed yesterday you said free as in puppy. So I like to think of like WordPress is free as in puppy. Drupal's like free as in pony. Like there's kind of like a different scale.
Free as in vote.
Right. Pony boat. It's kind of the same. Sailboat, speedboat, I don't know.
Well, I think we are out of time for today, but if you guys want to catch us in the hallway, we are always happy to talk more Backdrop with you guys. Thank you guys very much for coming today.
Thanks for coming.